Okay. All right. So Positron, an integrated development environment by Posit, kind of the successor to RStudio. This is what it looks like. I was just talking about how you can get it from the Positron website, cross-platform and for the most part open source. Once you agree to the license agreements, you can get the installers, and you'll notice that there's, at least for Windows, system level install and user level install, depending on if you have admin rights or not on your computer. This is based on VS Code. So if you've used VS Code before, you'll be familiar with the structure of the application, the different panels, and the sidebar on the left here. Sorry if I don't use the correct terms. Cameron can correct me because Cameron has a lot more experience with VS Code than I do, and probably you do too. I'm still very new to Positron. I'm still discovering lots of things, but I'm pretty excited about it. And it's at the stage, I think, that's quite stable and where you can find most of the things you're familiar with from RStudio. So a little welcome panel here. The console at the bottom where we can run code. On the right-hand side, you've got your kind of environment from RStudio, but it's called session here, where you will see your objects that you create and you will see your plots as well. Now, in RStudio, we talk about our project, and here we deal with vocabulary that's a bit more generic and that will be applicable to more languages. Remember, we're kind of moving away from just talking about R in this tool. It's supposed to be flexible, and R and Python are supposed to be at the same level. So the terms that are used are a bit more generic in that they apply to pretty much any language. You can create what we remember as a project, but it's really a folder. You can call it a folder. So you can do that from here, open or create a new folder. You can also go to File and New Folder. New folder from template. That's a good way to find the different kinds of projects. You can create a new project, Python project or a new R project. We're going to click on R project. If you want to follow along, you can. And click next. Similar to RStudio, what the project is. So here I'm going to say that today is the 26th of February. I'm going to say discovering Positron. It's the name. I'm going to create that as a subdirectory of my R projects. Okay, so this is the name of the folder you're creating the project. This is where it's going to be saved. You can straight away initialize a Git repository if you want, but we'll have a look at that later. And the folder has been created. Where do I want to open it? I'm going to click on current window. So I just have one window. And when you create a project, you then see the files on the left-hand side. You can see that we've got the Explorer panel that is expanded, that is open, and you can see what's inside your folder. Currently, there's nothing interesting, but we can create a new script. You can use the little new file button here, or you can use the one that was just opened, the temporary script here. I might close this and use the button new file, and I'm going to call this one process.r. Press enter, and there's my little R script. I think they've put in a lot of effort to make the transition easier from RStudio and Positron, so you'll be able to run code using the same shortcuts. I'm going to start here with a little bit of a comment introducing Positron. And I'm going to create a new object, for example, num1, and use the assignment operator. I can use the same shortcut, Alt dash, to put in the assignment operator. And number 42, Control Enter works as well. Control Enter is to run from script. And Alt- is the assignment operator. that works in the same way. And now that I've created an object, you can see that it was run in the console. It's in the session tab or session panel. It's under values. So it's under variable, and inside variables, it's under values. Num1 is 42, right? And it tells me the type. So another shortcut that you can use is the same as in RStudio, Control-Shift-M. It also works for the pipe. So for example, if I create something a bit more complex, my nums is a new object, and it's going to be 2.345, then piped to round to 2 digits, and then another pipe where I repeat with rep.int 10 times. I can execute that. You can see that it recognizes the whole block as one single command. And there's my nums. That looks a little bit different. It's a vector, so I've got 10 copies of the same number in there. If I expand that, that's a cool extra thing that RStudio didn't have, I think. You can expand one-dimensional vectors as well, right? You can see what it contains. It tells me the size there. You can also bring up help pages with F1, still on the topic of shortcuts. F1 does work for help pages. If I click on rep.int, for example, and then press F1 on my keyboard, the function key, F1, it opens the help tab. And there's my nicely formatted help page for the function. So that's great. And if I create a function, for example, let's create greeter, our usual greeter where the function will take one argument, the name of the person, open the curly braces for the body of your function, and the function pastes together 2 strings, hello, and the name. Actually, you can finish with an exclamation point for a bit of emotion. And when I define this function, when I run this whole block of code, I can then use my greeter name Nick, and it says hello Nick. So that works fine. If I go back to my session, you'll see that still under variables, you've got a part that's called functions, and all those ones you can expand them and close them. I can also click on that little button that's on the right to open exactly what has defined that function, what is the code that defines the function. And so all these are grouped together in the variables. That's what it's called. You've got your values, you've got your functions, and you'll see in a minute when we import data or when we show data in our environment, it'll pop up in there as well. Now, some things still don't work. One example that I've found, and I'm sure there's a few different ones. You might remember the function data. When I run data without any argument, if I do that in RStudio, actually, it opens a new tab and it shows me the information, the available data sets from base R. And that was quite convenient, but in the case of Positron, it opens it in a separate little window. It looks a little bit different. It looks more like the R without anything, right? It's not completely integrated into Positron. That's a kind of one difference, but there's not that many things that I can actually find that don't work as well as in RStudio, which is interesting. But with the data function, we can load some data. For an example data frame, I'm going to do data on msleep. When you run that, well, it tells me it doesn't exist because I haven't loaded the package that contains it. Library ggplot2, that's where it is. Then if I run data msleep, I should see in my session panel Yeah, under values, you've got msleep. It's currently unevaluated. That's how the function data does it. But if I start looking at it, if I say msleep to see the contents, you'll see that it actually goes into a data section that is for data frames, I guess. So similarly to RStudio, you can have a look at the size, expand that, and find the different columns that are in there, the type of data that it contains. You can see that we've got 83 rows of data. And I'm going to straight away show you one of the coolest things about Positron, sorry. When you open a viewer for a data frame, so if I click on that little grid on the right of the data frame here, next to msleep, it opens this, I might close my Explorer for now so you can see it. So it opens a viewer like in RStudio, where you can explore your data, you can sort your columns, you can filter, etc. But a couple of cool features. There's this arrow that's on the left here that can expand a kind of side panel for your viewer. And this gives you a cool overview of your columns, where you can click on the arrow to expand and see, for example, how many unique values there are in the name column. Well, let's have a look at the categorical variable. Vor has 5 different levels. You can see a little histogram of it. And you can see also how many are missing, which is great. And this little percentage thing is the number of missing values. So you get this really cool overview, visual overview of the data in that data frame that we didn't used to get in RStudio. I think that this is one of the biggest pluses of Positron when compared to RStudio. Is this cool data viewer. Another cool thing that I've noticed here is that you can use a column to pin it. So say you always want to see the name, you can pin the column. And for data frames that have lots of columns, it's super useful, a bit like in Excel, because you always, I remember in RStudio always going back and forth between, which one is the one I'm looking for. So really handy to pin columns. Yeah, so definitely play with that. See how useful that little viewer in Positron is. Right, so I've got some data. I'll show you what happens when you create a plot. We've got like ggplot2 loaded, so I'm going to create a pretty simple plot on the msleep dataset. So with ggplot on the dataset msleep, the mapping of aesthetics is going to be on the x-axis, I'm going to put sleep total. So that's how long those mammals sleep for. And on the y-axis, I'm going to put sleep underscore REM, rapid eye movement. And we'll see if there's a relationship between the two. But I also want to color by Vor, so what kind of diet they have. After a plus sign, I can use geom underscore point because I'm creating a scatter plot with colors. And I'll give more space to my plots panel. So see how, if I go to help, that disappears. It uses the whole vertical area. Plots is really part of your session tab, which I guess makes sense because you can think of them as objects you've created, outputs. I don't know. But yeah, there's a plot section that you can expand or close. You can save your plots like in RStudio. One thing that I thought was interesting is this little circle here allows you to put in a filter. So I could put a dark filter on my plot to get kind of a dark mode one. Or you can set it to follow theme, and we'll have a look at that in a second to make sure that the plot is adapted to the theme you are currently using. We'll test that and see if that works. Right. And while we're at the topic of plotting, what I might do is also show you that you can create interactive ones and see them inside Positron. So if I save the previous plot as an object, let's say called P, right? So if I run that again, P can be used to show the plot, but I can also reuse it when I load library plotly and then use the function ggplotly. I can feed it the P object. And you'll see that in the plots panel, you get the interactive visualization, which I think is neat because before you had a viewer panel and a plots panel that were separate in RStudio. So you had to look at two different places to see your visualizations. Right. Now I've been using some headings there. At the top, I've got introducing Positron for my script. I might add another one here and say, headings do work. So I've got two headings. You notice that as I scroll down, I keep the heading at the top here for my script, which is good to know which section I'm in. Another thing that it does is you also see how this also state pin at the top. It's the beginning of my function definition. Because I can collapse this, I can also see, if it's a big section, I can see the start of the section at the top kind of stays sticky, which is quite fun. Same thing with your piped blocks. So here, if I had 10 lines, I could still see the beginning at the top and remember, oh yes, this is how I assign, or I'm assigning to this particular object. But if you look at your Explorer tab, this one here, you'll see that at the bottom, there's also the outline. And in my script, I can see where num1 is defined, where my nums is defined, where the greeter function is defined, where the p object is defined, and also all my headings. So you can really structure your document like this and jump from one section to the other, which is quite handy. And you can collapse those headings as well. Now, a little bit about the UI outside of the script. We do have the option to auto-wrap the code. So I've changed the global settings to have that, but that's not set up by default. You can see that if I change the width, it auto-wraps to the next line. You can do that in a couple of ways. In View, you can tick word wrap, but know that when you do that, it only works for the current file, and it only works while you've got Positron open, then it's reset when you open it again. If you want to change that, you can go to Files, Preferences, Settings. It opens a new tab with your settings, and you definitely have to search for it because there's so many different settings to play with. You can search for word wrap and then set that to on. If you set it to on here, it's going to be on for always, unless you change the setting in the view temporarily. I also want to show you where themes are. If you go to File, Preferences, and Themes, you can click on Color Theme to change the general look of your UI. And that opens the palette at the top where you've got Positron Light, the default, as well as Positron Dark. And now that we've changed these themes, I'm going to try and see if my plots actually follow the theme. If I change to follow theme, yeah. So now I can have automatically, without actually changing the code of my plot, I can make sure that it's not too bright in the plots panel, that it follows the theme. If I export the plot, it's probably still going to be, white background, but at least it automatically follows that and makes it blend in, which is quite nice. So yeah, play with the themes as well. I'm sure there's lots of other ones to add if those ones don't work for you. And because it popped up just then, I'll show you that when you use VS Code or Positron, it's pretty important to know about the command palette. And that's to find all sorts of things. So if I use the shortcut Control or Command Shift P, Control Shift P, opens the palette at the top, and this is where you can search for pretty much anything, any kind of action you want to use. And that can be handy. For example, I'll show you, still related to the UI, if you go to View and Appearance, there's one that's called Zen Mode. There's a lot of parts to Positron. There's lots of features, and maybe you want to have just like the reader mode in a browser, in a web browser, you want to focus just on your code for a bit and not have distractions around it. You can click on Zen mode. You can see that there's a shortcut, but if you forget about the shortcut, there's currently no button to go back to the normal mode. So that's quite nice if you really want to just focus on your code for a bit. But then to exit that, and you can find a button to exit, you can use Control-Shift-P, your palette command, and then look for Zen mode. And there should be a toggle Zen mode. And then you're back to the normal. So the palette should always work and can get you out of things that you've turned on, sometimes without noticing. So I mentioned that Positron is not just R, it's also Python. So if I open my Explorer on the left and I create a new file and call it, let's say, second script.py, you might have a project that relies on modules from Python, packages from R, and you can mix that into the same project. If I execute this, you see that the icon changes next to the script. It is a Python script. And now I can edit this script. Let's say I create a second number. I use the equal sign this time, and I'm going to put 2 plus 3 in there. Execute that, Control-Enter works as well, and you'll see that now it goes to a Python console. If you look at the bottom, it has loaded Python 3.13, has run my command, it has worked, and you can see your different consoles. There's the Python one here, and there's the R one here that's still available. If I look at my session on the right, I can see that I'm currently using Python. The values that exist are only my second number that contains the value 5. And you can jump from one to the other. If I go back to process.r and, for example, run this msleep command, it automatically switches back to the R console. It switches back to my objects that I've created before. You should see at the top also an indication of what you're currently using. There's the interpreter that's mentioned at the top of the window here. Right. And I want to finish with a couple of integrations that are important, in my opinion. There's obviously lots of features and extensions that we talk about for hours, but I do want to mention that Quarto is integrated. And if I create yet another file here, I'm going to click on New File. I can create a new file from scratch here, but I can also go to the new menu here and say New File, which gives me a few different choices. It opens the palette, and I can see text file, R file, Python file, some of the most common ones. You can write Jupyter notebooks as well in Positron. It does support that. But I can create a Quarto document from here as well. So if I click on Quarto document, you get a temporary Quarto file with a title. I'm going to say my report in HTML format. I can put some text here. I would say that this is a heading of level 2. And if I want to include some code, I can use this button here that says Insert Code Cell. When you click on that, it gives you the choice of the different languages. I'm going to use R. And I'm going to copy and paste the plot that I created before. So I'm going to go library ggplot2 and create the same plot as before. Oops. There we go, my plot. Here's a plot. So here I'm using the source mode for editing a quarter document. I'm going to save my file and say that it's called report.qmd, quarter markdown. So that's saved in my project. You can see it here. See, it's a quarter file. It's got the logo next to it. I can switch to the visual mode if I want to, and that's behind the three dots. At the top of your panel here, you've got more actions. And then in there, you can switch to edit in visual mode. And once you turn that on, you'll get that usual toolbar at the top that allows you to change styles, format your text, add a list with several elements, add pictures, more formatting, inserting all sorts of things, including your citations that could probably pull from lots of different sources. You can use BibTeX, you can use Zotero, you can cite from DOI, it's quite powerful. And also table controls, which are notoriously difficult to deal with when you write directly in Markdown. So you get more that what you see is what you get experience with this mode. Make sure you save that. And then when you click on preview, you will switch to the terminal to run a quarter command and render the document. It's just finished. It's watching the changes. So if you save it again, it should update the document, and you can see it in the Viewer tab on the right. So this is what my document looks like. I can open it in the browser if I want to have it use a bit more space. You can see it here. So it's still looking at my file locally. Yeah, but it's nicely integrated. And note that the language is a bit different in that here it says preview rather than render, but it does render the document. You do have the file here. It stays there, right? Report.html is the rendered document. So preview gives you a live preview as well as the rendered file. And importantly, when you're ready to publish this, you can click on the deploy with Posit Publisher. It's called deploy because you can deploy all sorts of things to Posit Cloud, including Shiny apps, or using different frameworks as well. It supports quite a few things. If I go to the website, the Positron website, there is a section on publishing reports quickly. If you open that, you'll see that you can publish Shiny, Dash, Gradio, Streamlit, Bokeh, Quarto, Markdown, Jupyter Notebook, Fast API, Flask, Plumber, and more kinds of projects. But if I try with a QMD file, with a quarter file, if I click on deploy, it opens the Posit Publisher kind of extension and gives you a few choices. You can publish everything, including the source code, but you can also publish the rendered document only. I might do that now. If it's the first time, it's going to run you through the steps to create your account, to connect it, etc. It's quite easy to do. And here I'm going to say, example, report publishing. No, I'm just going to call it Positron report. Pick the account that you've connected with. And then that should give you more settings here. Once you're happy with those settings, you can click on deploy your project. I've already rendered it, so I'm going to click on deploy. It goes through the different steps. And now it says it has been successfully deployed at da-da-da-da-da. If I click on view content now, this button here, it says this was the last successful deployment. If I click on view content, it takes me to my Posit Cloud. this is my admin interface, and I can see my document published here. But if I want to share this with someone, I can copy the link and then send that to someone. So it will look like this to someone who opens it. There's my published document. And I'll put it in the chat just to confirm that everyone can see it. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Cameron. We'll see you later. And there it is. So you should be able to see the same thing. If the settings are right and it's publicly visible, you could follow that link and see the same document published. So I think that's quite nice to have a button to do that rather than running a command. It runs you through the whole thing. And once you're familiarized with the different options here, the buttons to render, to deploy, to then view the deployed content, and also to choose which files you want to include. Remember, I picked to only publish the rendered document, so it only ticked report.html as well as the companion files that go with it. For example, the libraries. It doesn't include the QMD. It doesn't include the other files in my project. But there's lots more options here. We've only scratched the surface, and I'll stop here because it's already close to an hour. Hopefully that gives you a taste of it. Oh yeah, well, the last thing I want to mention is Git still. Yeah, it does integrate Git nicely. It works really well. You can straight away publish to GitHub to link to that remote, your local repository, or you can also initialize a repository from here and add a message, initial commit your changes, make sure that you save all your files. And then you get your little history at the bottom here, which is great to have. You can see your changes. You've got your commit message here. You've got your history at the bottom. If I make a change here, I'm going to say integrates Git and Quarto. Save that. Create another commit. Mention Git and Quarto. Commit. And there's my history. Initial commit, mention Git. You can also visualize your changes from there. So also very nicely integrated Git interface rather than running commands on the side or from the terminal, which you can still do. If you need to do anything fancier with Git, you can run that from the terminal.